Well, no theme other than the forecasting and inventory on more generally as trends to that. So. Yes.
Yes, I have a question about promotional effects, for example. So one in the talks that was mentioned before moving into forecast, we should kind of take out the outliers and not move the data, but somewhat exclude promotional effects from it, and then make the predictions and then take it from there. So my question is, if we take out some of the outliers which are caused by promotions and then make predictions on the data which is already have a bit of subtracted or reduce the variation, so how do you then put back the idea about the price changes?
Okay, so if you think about the data as either promotional data or regular data,
yes.
How do you take into account those two groups of data that you have?
By making forecasts.
Yeah, sure. So I look after the clothing home piece, not the food bit, but it's doing well. So our process is, we use JDA as a tool. I think a few other people use that in here. So there's, I guess, the data that we use to perform analysis to work out what the uplift in sales should be, and then there's the data within JDA, the actual forecasting engine that we then use to calculate the total forecast. So the analysis is done outside to work out that uplift, and then applied into JDA in the future. But JDA itself we need to tell it when there was a promotion, so that it effectively cleanses the data historically to create the right level of base forecast.
So it would create baseline promotion?
Yes, exactly. And on top of that, we'd apply an uplift in future when the
And how
promotion.
that uplift then would be from where? So basically it would come like from a separate piece of analysis?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Keeping the two things, because you want to have the total demand in the analysis, but then in the forecasting engine you want the base forecast on which to add to it. So keeping them separate kind of works for us anyway.
One of the ones that I've seen is taking it, as I say, is taking the promotion out, or trying to take promotion out, because while you might run similar promotions, you could be discounting something else at a different time or at the same time, so you don't know. Clothing is probably a bad idea, but if I take beer, if you've got an 8-pack on promotion with one customer and somebody else has got an 8-pack, then you can see the uplift. But if you're then doing an 8-pack with one customer, a 12-pack, and that's retailing at a different price, when you come down from the 12-pack down to the unit price of each individual item, you don't know what your competitor set is also doing at the same time. So you might be running a promotion, which the last time you did it at Tesco, it went like a dream. Next time you run it, you predict it's going to be the same level, and it bombed. You go, why the hell is it bombed? Then to work out, the reason why is that last time we did it, no one else was on promotion or a promotion into that retailer. This time, Budweiser was on promotion at a stupid price.
Yeah, so I see where you're going. So my main concern here is if it depends how complicated or advanced is that promotional area where you kind of highlighted it. Because when promotion happens, you may have also other factors in place, media, seasonal effects, so on and so on. And sometimes the same promotion can work differently at different points in time. So if the method is if you just kind of assume that all the uplift during that period is it because of promotion, you may kind of do wrong conclusions. That's what I'm going. So it depends probably how that promotional effect is then identified. Because the nice thing about the forecasting, the way I see it, is that at the same time you have multiple factors competing for the effect, and you're able kind of to tease out which one is more relevant.
Yeah, I guess the composition of your base forecast is really important. What you keep in there, and what you get rid of it. So things like the seasonalities, obviously key. I guess recurring events like Christmas, Easter, you'll need to move around a bit, but they should remain your base forecast. Get that right, and then overlay take promotions out and then add them back in, and then pick the right, I suppose, right period to compare against to arrive at the calculator. So, yeah.
John,
Just one thing to add, which is the period we often forget is after the promotion has ended, because people are sometimes buying, and so there needs to be not just an uplift but a downlift. That's the wrong word, isn't it? But you know what I mean? A downshift. I think that's a better phrase to apply to that baseline.
We don't do that, but I think we actually should. I don't think commercially, putting a downlift on sales is suicide. So, but actually, you probably should do that.
Well, I prefer expression clause where you're going to buy it after the growth.
Exactly, and people wait for our promotions and buy staples, and we sell less stocks after promotion, but less than base.
For the retail modelling I've been doing, the models themselves capture all the elements you were talking about. So in that sense, you've got an estimate of the uncertainty. It may not be a particularly good one. So there's the baseline approach that you were describing, Frank, and a full modelling approach. Most of the effects, obviously I'm talking about a particular retailing database, most of the effects are own product effects. So competitive effects or competing brands and pack sizes are less important. They're not of no importance, but they're just less important. Other questions? Yes, please.
A bit of a strategic one, really, about IT, really. I've read up, seen some really interesting stuff on the LUMS sites and blogs from some of you, your team, and the work of Rob Hinman and Monash University and such. There's a lot of research that is becoming a bit more, widely available through our packages and such. But I don't know anything about the DemandWorks product, I'm afraid. But from the commercial off-the-shelf packages I've seen for doing forecasting, they seem a bit left in the past. Do you see a move for forecasting and demand planning shifting to more of a data science role rather than a reliance on commercial packages?
I think there's a considerable innovation adoption gap. I think that's the sort of nice way of putting it. And we've seen that for a long time. But I think you mentioned the open source packages. That is making a difference, actually. So, in fact, we've done some work with your company, Ivan, in making some of the recent work now available commercially. We've also been approached by some American software companies, not for us to do anything, but they're taking some of that open source material and weaving it into their own packages. So I'm a bit more optimistic than I would have been 5 years ago. But I agree with you, there's still a gap.
What does Unicorn use?
So it's actually quite a discussion to us. We as a business have quite a lot of interest in forecasting, obviously. And one of the strategic directions of our team, so I'm the machine learning technology in the data science team, and one of the key things we're interested in is being able to forecast things better. Now, we've been relying on open source libraries, mostly Python-based open source libraries that use machine learning techniques to improve on forecast accuracy. Now, it's promising, but I would also say that, because you touched on the IT aspect of it, it'll bring a lot of complexity with it as well. So we've been seeing very encouraging results so far, and when we compare with the traditional statistical algorithms for forecasting, we do see benefits. But it'll be, I think, a question for each individual business to assess whether the cost in terms of infrastructure, because the complexity of the systems will be a lot more.
If you think of the forecasting approach as a model-based approach or an algorithm-based approach, plus the value-added potential from SO and OP processes and the various managerial processes, as you get more complexity in the model, you probably get less value from the value-added. Why? Because they've no idea what's going on in the model, basically. The models are too complicated for the value added to work.
And I would say specifically regarding complexity of models. So in machine learning, yeah, it's usually the case that models are more complicated than the models. There are classes of machine learning models that are actually not as complicated as neural networks, as you probably know. But the complexity in the underlying systems, in the IT infrastructure, will still be there. Just let me give you an example. So to use the methods that we've been using, to forecast, say, 100,000 SKUs on a monthly kind of rollout inventory, we need to probably process everything in about 3 hours once a month. To do that forecast, we need probably 5-6 servers to be available during one day of the month. So you have to have that infrastructure locked, or you have to have the ability to access cloud services that allow you to dynamically scale the infrastructure that you need. So that requires a lot of resources. It's complex. The system, the IT system as a whole is a bit more complex.
Some of you may be aware of the M4 competition, where the winner of this competition of methods was worked for Uber, and they have a massive computing resource to apply, and it was a machine learning style method, but they had a lot of computer time.
Which becomes less of an issue now because you've got lots of like 4 major clouds available to you. You can easily scale up and down the resource you use with cloud like AWS, Google, Azure, etc. And they have ready off-the-shelf machine learning tools if you wanted to take advantage of that as well.
Can I just add something
Yeah,
to the other thing which is promising is a hybrid between machine learning and statistical methods. So
That was in the M4.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what happened there is that it's the classification that was done by the machine learning algorithm, and then relatively simple, I mean, okay, not that simple, but relatively simple methods were then employed. And I think that has a certain advantage because at least it means it's not a total black box. Maybe it's a grey box, I don't know, but you know, it's not totally a black box. You can still see some of what's going on.
Yeah, but we already know that the customers will definitely demand some sort of interpretability.
Exactly.
Because they still have the approach where they want to be able to decide what model the software is using, manually pick up the outliers, manually set the trend, manually set the seasonality, even though the model can do all of that for them and potentially even better than a human like do. They still need that ability to do this, to tweak it in the same way as it's always been done, and also they need to understand why did the model decide that there's this trend. Can you split down to every component?
Doesn't that boil down to the issue of trust in the model, trust in the forecast?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But the problem is you can't just tell people to trust it. That's what we
You need
do.
to prove yourself that your forecast is good
I
enough.
think even with that, I found that even with natural evidence, it's still difficult because with a kind of sales merchandising group, it's not about that. It's about control. And these are age-old problems, right? You know, and we're kind of still pretty torn between the art of merchandising and sales versus this newly available science. It really probably in opposite directions, I'd say, at the moment. And there's also, you know, we've got 20 million SKUs that we're trying to plan every day, and we've got a problem with very low volume. So 75% of our SKUs sell less than one in 40 days or something. And it's because we've got size. There's a size complexity. So is it really worth going after more science to plan those, or is it just we just put one there and it will sell eventually? They're the kind of trade-offs, but there's definitely a cultural and piece going on at the moment, which is.
John, you go, Mike.
Well, I was just sort of thinking earlier, an interesting conversation, right, with our colleagues there at the back, because I think it depends how the forecasts translate through. If you basically decided you're going to have an item in stock and one is the number, that's fine, right? Until you decide no longer to stock it, of course, and that itself requires a forecast. But I think, going back to those slow volume, it is a difference between stocking 1 and 2, That's not a trivial difference.
No, no. quite.
Because if you have that scaled across hundreds or thousands of items, you've got a huge impact. But on the 0-1, then yes.
Also depends if your item is very expensive or not. So if it's a
Well,
cheap one, it
exactly,
doesn't
yeah.
hurt.
Yeah.
But if it's like some huge rolling stock that was worth 30k, then you gotta
You've got
you gotta think.
Uniplant presumably has a lot of slow-moving items as
Yes.
well. So, and some of the work, Amazon has published some work in the area. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting issue about whether you can aggregate both across time and across, I mean, for example, you talked about size unit, but maybe the issue is actually the style rather than the size. So maybe if one goes out of one size, that just says you need to order one in another size, you know, the keeping, because you have a size profiles, don't you? So you can just apply the size profile to the aggregate. Oh, no, I don't know, you do. Other questions?
I think, having worked both sides of the issue of planning and data science, probably the biggest problem is communication. Because most of the things are quite achievable, models can be explained, etc. But the problem is the data scientists speak a technical language, which is opaque, even to planners who are fairly technical people, let alone business. What the comments are on that.
I mean, recruitment is it's for whatever role, but I've always looked for, you know, people with mathematical ability who can actually tell the story of the numbers, and they're quite difficult to find. You tend to get one or the other, and I'm not sure what the right answer is. And I get that I've gone out to the market at various points in the year, recruiting, and found quite a very different bunch each time, and for no apparent reason, but you know, and there's a little bit of luck in there, but yeah, it's just finding that right mix of skills, and how many that can do it.
You may expect me to say this, but part of the answer is, of course, in education. Because doing straight maths degree does not necessarily prepare you for doing the sort of roles that we talk about. So in our university, we do have degrees in business analytics. Notice the word business is first and analytics is second. It's about that linkage. So I think, you know, that's one of the answers, but it's not a quick win. It's going to take time. Because it is not easy. You know, some of the things we've been trying to communicate today, behind the scenes, are quite technical. But to get that across in a non-technical way is not actually an easy thing to do.
Experience.
Yes, I think one thing that definitely helps in our case is having from the top level management a strong culture of go and see. That's what we call effectively every data scientist that joins our company is heavily encouraged to go to the shop floor, stay in the shop floor, communicate directly with operators. These can be stock managers, these can be product owners, programmers as well. We have training courses that are very embedded in real world problems that we face in the country. Effectively, we try to break the barriers between things like Six Sigma, operations, data science, programming. I think that actually works quite well.
Any other comments on the same question from the audience? You must all have this experience on one side of the fence or the other.
What's an agile point of solving something like this, where you have communication between multiple groups managing different stakeholders?
It's part of it, but
Yeah.
it's not. It's part of an answer. But getting people to be able to explain their work.
Speak the same language.
Yeah, that's a skill in itself. Agile can definitely support that, absolutely. But this is a specific skill. I know, and it's great to hear that it's actually being, taught there. So it's historical.
I think we're helped currently by the rather spurious, from my perspective, inflation of machine learning or AI into the solution to every problem at senior management level. So we've got a level of interest, both in the degree programs, in workshops like this, that we haven't seen for many years. And John and I are sufficiently old enough to be operational researchers, and it's a bit reminiscent of the same. We weren't actually around in the 60s when this was the case, early 70s for me.
Waiting for you.
For me. I had to say that before he did. Hostages taken here. But, so that there was a wave of belief in scientific management, which rode on the Second World War to a certain extent, which got lost thoroughly into the 70s, 80s. But now data science is the answer to everybody's problems. In fact, it's bullshit, but that's another matter.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of people talking about it as well, but not really doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fancy regression or something.
So I can answer also from
Yeah, please.
the Unicorn's perspective. Every effort that we do has to have a business case, and if it's machine learning that has a better business case, then that wins over another method that's been traditionally used. And if it's not, and it does not add value, then there's no point in spending all that compute time and the clever resources to develop the models if they're not benefiting. Also, sometimes it's about you can develop a very clever model that does give a good accuracy, but if the operation is not agile enough or is not able to adopt it properly and change the operation to actually take those insights into account and change the way they're doing things, then again the value and benefit is not seen. And businesses doesn't care what another buzzword you're using, AI or ML. They care about their bottom line. They care about you bringing a benefit. Where is the value from all the work you're doing? So yes, board is interested, but they're there to see the value. And once you show the value, then they're switched on.
Other comments on this?
Do you have examples how we should have been?
Sorry?
So on the value, I really connect
Oh, yeah,
to
yeah.
that. So what are the ways how you would calculate the value? How would you show?
Yeah, you've got to translate the change in operations. So for example, if you're trying to forecast whether you reduced inventory or you're still meeting your service levels, you might use forecasting for other topics like maybe resource planning, how many people you need to take care of that volumes today. And so if your model provides a more accurate forecast, then you can maybe reduce the number of people that is required on the shop floor to take care of that much volume. Therefore, they can cut down one head, and that's the value it brings. So that if that cannot translate, or it doesn't give a better forecast, and doesn't translate into an actual monetary value or some other value that the board is able to accept as this is the business value this delivers, then they're not interested. So you've got to have a clear business case before you can engage in the project.
So
Like I think it's the
do
case for everything.
you think there's some sort of risk that a data scientist will manage that? Like you start a first data science project for this company, and they're like, cool, machine learning, but out of consequence of some context, it fails. It doesn't deliver on something that they really want. And they go, okay, machine learning theory doesn't work. We're not going to trust this in the
No,
future.
you
This
gotta
is something
keep
we can
trying,
manage.
right? It's different
But
cases.
the board is still concerned about the bottom line. It's still one for us. Why try it again?
The point I was making is there's a positive win currently, and that high levels of skepticism have occurred through failures, but also, in fact, there's quite an interesting research theme going on here, that people remember the failure of a model more than they remember the failure of a person. It's called algorithm aversion. But that's we're somewhat protected for a while. But why did the OR groups? Did the Unicorn OR group get closed down, John?
So I have to make a confession here. I actually used to work for Unicorn. It was actually quite a long time ago. So while I was in it, it wasn't closed down, no.
I should have left.
But I think probably by about the mid-90s, it was, as in many organisations, operational research was outsourced. I think that's what happened there. It also actually happened in the previous company I worked for, Rolls-Royce, which had a larger R group, around 25 people. And that was outsourced. So it wasn't that they stopped using operational research, but it was no longer an integral part of the organisation. There are disadvantages to this, as I think companies are now understanding, because yes, I mean, these people who are outside the organisation, they are experts in their own field, of course, but they don't have the same knowledge. It's interesting what you said about being encouraged to actually go down to the warehouse or talk to the inventory planners and really understand what they are doing and the way they're thinking, because I think that makes a huge difference actually in being able then to convince, to adapt your own solution and then convince. But you're right about the new wave. I mean, to give you an idea, we've had just under 1,000 applications for one master's degree in analytics this year. That's incredible. I mean, we only take about 100 students.
Maybe
maximum.
affected by flu, Mike.
Well, whatever the reasons, the demand is certainly there. So I think Robert's right, there is an opportunity for us to move ahead with analytics and the data science, but still retaining the skepticism that we always should, really, that these things need to be really thoroughly tested.
Other questions? We're going to stop definitely in 5 minutes or so. I've got one software question. I tend to be very sceptical of the software innovations that are implemented. Graham, you've obviously got a demand works perspective, but if you look at the industry as a whole, often best practice comes from the software. Let me ask you, where do you think the failures are in software, in this forecasting inventory? Perhaps I should ask the other three members of the panel as well. We'll ask them as well.
Software helps decisions to be made.
Yeah, but it can make bad decisions or good decisions.
It helps. It's also about communication and people working together in a team. So if people not taking a number, the computer says 10, so the answer is 10. It becomes a black box. You can't put it. People aren't ready, and people will remember that, oh, the system said 10, I told you it should have been 8, and it was 9. So I was more right than it, or whatever. I think software has a use and purpose for crunching lots of numbers, taking away repetitive tasks, taking away a lot of the crap that a planner needs to do. But you still need, validate as well, people who work for a software company now, you still need people to add intelligence, to communicate, to talk to people in order to come up with an optimal decision at that time based on the information available of what they believe to be the optimal.
Yeah, I think software providers particularly like to add features with which they can then,
Charge you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that only adds to complexity, but it doesn't always add to extra value. That's a big problem, but I think that's just that's what we're living with. I think typically they're great calculators, but not. I don't think they position themselves as great analytics tools, but they follow instructions typically. A lot of calculations, but they tend to be pretty rigid. I think that the comment was made before that they feel quite traditional now. And some of them you talked about just regression, isn't it? I think that some of the models that are sitting in some of these systems they've been around a while. Maths, right? So but they're very big and they're very expensive as well. And they
You've been developing your own software. Quite a big effort, even with the modules available in Python or R or whatever.
Yeah, certainly. So there's quite a lot to think about, I guess. We're trying to think of methods that we're developing as things that play well with humans. So one of the things we're very interested in is based on machine learning, and the reason why we think this is good avenue to pursue specifically for forecasting is, again, to the point that I mentioned earlier, be able to quantify uncertainty and report uncertainty, to be able to tell the human, actually, I'm not sure at all about the decision, or I'm pretty sure about the decision, but also being able to report on the components that make the model, as opposed to ask a human to interpret a coefficient that is very difficult to understand. Another point, for instance, is being able to allow the human behind the system to specify priors, things that the human believes in, and are good starting points for the algorithm to do the last bit, the last mile. problem, and I think interpretability and being able to communicate is key.
I just want to say really that in my experience, when new software is introduced, even if it's not particularly sophisticated, the training is generally which buttons to press to make sure we get the answer. It's not about the methods that are being used, and I think this is a great shame. It's something we've done with a number of companies to actually just have short courses to explain to, and I'm not talking about advanced methods now. Let's take exponential smoothing, not the most advanced method. But I can assure you, you can go to some companies with demand planners, they know basically what it's about. But they don't know, for example, how should I change those smoothing parameters? Oh, I was told by the initial trainer to leave it alone. Well, no, you don't have to leave it alone, actually. You can experiment with it. You can try different values, and in fact, it might work out much better for you. Not only that, some of the values which have been recommended are not even appropriate. So this poor level of training, even on relatively simple systems, is really a problem. And if we make the systems more sophisticated, which we can, then I think the case is even stronger for people knowing. They don't need to know all the technicalities, but they need to know something, have some intuition about what's going on. Otherwise, think about how much is invested in software. Now think about how much money is invested in training the users of that software. And you will soon come to the conclusion that that is an underinvestment.
I think there's actually two competing kind of theories on this, and I think we kind of swing a bit both ways, but about locking out the system and the suspicion of the demand planner and what the heck are they doing, and we don't understand it, so we're going to lock it down so it does the same thing every time, so therefore there's control. But then, I'm an advocate clearly of, if you train, if a person has a better capability, they're likely to do a better job with the system they're given. So it's sort of they're two extremes, but we kind of have both. But
Last question.
Are there any lessons to be learned from the downturn in OR's usage now to preempt?
Well, I would say that OR didn't have a downturn in terms of application. It had a downturn in terms of groups. So I don't know the answer, because if you look over decades, it's gone in waves, hasn't it? There's been various buzzwords. So maybe the optimal strategy is to invent a new buzzword every 4 or 5 years, or at least when the current buzzword is going out of fashion. So analytics was a good buzzword. That sort of went down slightly. Now data science is a great buzzword, so give that a little bit of time. So I'm hoping that as long as I sort of continue in this role, I'll just carry on doing the same sort of things, but I'll call it something which is fashionable. So there we are. That's maybe a somewhat
Maybe that's a good note to finish on for all of us. Give us a degree of optimism in these miserable days. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We will hopefully be having another one in November. Hopefully, Ivan, have they been signed up? People been offered the opportunity to sign up, so you'll get occasional newsletters from us. You'll be asked.
We have your emails in the Eventbrite, so we will send you a message with some summary information.
You won't get overwhelmed with stuff, but it will. And if any volunteers to talk about your forecasting, marketing analytics experiences would be most welcome, because we do try and have a mix, as you can see, a mix of audiences. And the final point is at least a few of us will be going for a quick drink in Adam and Eve, which is the pub on the corner. Okay, thank you again, and thank you to the panel.